The primary dust has settled. Almost all of the votes are counted, and the matchups for November are set.
There were actually some very close races that came down to the wire in the all-important U.S. House races.
Yeah, one that was really never in doubt was the 3rd district that covers most of Kent, Ionia, Berry, and Calhoun counties. And that includes the city of Grand Rapids. Meyer grocery heir and veteran Peter Meyer winning the GOP nod handily, beating out 4 others for Justin Amash's former seat. And he'll face off against Democrat Hillary Scholten in November. She ran unopposed in the primary.
Another clear winner on the Republican side, longtime House 6th District candidate Fred Upton had no problem fending off a challenge from fellow Republican Elena Olkey, getting more than 62% of the vote in that district. Upton will now face longtime state representative John Hoadley in the 6th District. Hoadley barely skirted by Jen Richardson for the Democratic nomination. In fact, Richardson had been leading much of the night, but that race flipped in the early morning hours.
News 8 political reporter Rick Albin was here into the wee hours of the morning to help us call some of those races.
Rick, we now know the matchups in these 2 races. So how much attention do you think these 2 seats are going to get nationally?
I think a fair amount, because the DCCC and the NRCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, have these seats on their radar, to be sure. Starting with the 3rd district, and the reason that seat gets so much focus is because it's an open seat. Now, Justin Amash, for most of his time in office, was a Republican, so the Republicans think of it as a seat to hold, so the NRCC is interested from that standpoint. But Democrats see it as an open seat, and the best time to pick up a seat is when it's open. It's very hard to beat incumbents, despite the fact that people complain about people being in Washington too long. Vast majority of the incumbents get reelected. So for that reason, I think both of those national entities are looking at that seat. And you have 2 candidates who have the ability now to raise some money, both in the district and outside the district. And I think as we enter this first phase of the general election, that's one that the nationals will focus on. And if you get down to the 6th district, you pointed out that John Hoadley has spent 3 terms in the state house. He has been elected in the district, the most populous part of the district that he hopes to serve when it comes to a congressional seat. And he too has some national attention and the ability to raise funds. And of course, Fred Upton has been in Washington for a very long time, has some very powerful friends in leadership there in Washington, so that will certainly have their attention as well. So as we begin this cycle, I think both of these are very high on the radar. I hasten to add that we don't know today what the big issue is going to be, say, at the end of September, the first part of October, and depending on what the lay of the land looks like, the attention could be withdrawn from these seats, again, just depending on what's out there. I point that out because this is going to be a very volatile election cycle, to say the least.
President Rick, what other contests are you watching closely as we move into the fall?
I think this is something we all have to watch really closely, and that is state house races. And I mean all of them. There are 110 of them. And here's why. Republicans right now have only 2 levers of power after being blown out 2 years ago. So they've got the Senate and they've got the House. Nobody in the Senate's up for election, so they will keep the Senate. But over in the House, it only takes 4 flips for the Democrats to take over the lower chamber. Democrats are going to be pressing hard to try to find those seats, those individual seats that they think they can make pickups in. And again, think about some of the open seats that we talked about last night. Republicans are going to be working equally as hard, and they've got more troops on the ground. The 2 parties, the Democrats and Republicans, more operatives, more people out there working than any election I can really remember. And it's interesting because at a time when they want to put pressure on those state house seats, it's more difficult, because if you think about it, running for the state house is really kind of like a contact sport. You got to go door to door, you got to talk to people, you got to shake hands. Well, people aren't doing that. So now they have to find other ways to make those contacts, to make sure they're talking to as many people in those prospective districts as possible. And I think that's going to be a race that's going to carry right through November, and I think both parties are going to push really hard on that.
Yes, campaigning during the pandemic. Yeah, it's a whole new animal. All right, Rick Albin, thank you for the live report.
It is.
Yeah.